And good morning. This is your Sensei Al Bob coming to you live on our channel, Dreamy Dreamland with Sensei Al Bob. And I invite all who wish to watch and come onto the live chat. Let's see. Yo, let's test. Yep, there it is. So there's somebody up there already. And so what's the secret to being happy? Secret to being happy is making others happy, right? So that's kind of it. Mm. Do. Uh, anyway, so there you are. One of you still there. It's been 1 minute and 52 seconds. And so what's the secret to being happy? Making others happy, right? Just think back in your life. The happiest you've ever been is when you're a little kid, when you made mommy and daddy happy, when you got a girlfriend or a boyfriend making your sweetie happy, right? So that's really it. It's that simple, right? And so you want to make me happy? Go to the dude awake 42 at Gmail and put something nice for in my PayPal. And here it is, a day or so after the Halloween, and they're already playing Christmas things. All the stores have their Christmas decorations and their sales on. Usually they wait till after Thanksgiving, and so it's obvious that the businesses are a little trepidous about, meaning their biggest, where they make at least a third, if not more, of their money is Christmas, right? And so, the general milieu of the media is, certain people hate Donald Trump and other people love Donald Trump, and our economy is doing pretty good. Who knows, right? I got my, 45 hat on, and if you, with a critical mind, look at what all of the presidents did, and from Teddy Roosevelt to today, right? And Teddy Roosevelt was, he represented the ruling class, but he realized that, he was a conservative. He was swayed by this new thought of environmental, Thoreau's books, and other people who were saying, this is a beautiful country. We should save some of it before we destroy it all. Because we, from day one up until around Teddy Roosevelt, almost, 300, almost 400 years, what was it? It was, stealing, cheating, lying, killing, The only good Indian was a dead one, Let's cheat them out of everything we can. And pretty much every contract that white Europeans made with indigenous people, they broke, or they just killed them all, right? The tribe I lived with in Australia, the Wallamajiri, in the mid 60s, they were living out in the middle of nowhere near Ayers Rock, and they found uridium, titanium, gold, and coal on their property. And, they just went out there and shot everyone in the head, killed about 700 people. And the only people who survived were the handful of people who were out picking berries. And those are people I went to stay with. And I was sent out there by the government to, because Australia wanted to have the Olympics in Australia. And they had like a pretty, bad, human rights historical motif. And pretty much every white European that went into an indigenous land had a pretty bad human rights motif. And today we still have a really pretty bad human rights motif. And that's because everyone, no one, very few people are happy, because everyone's thinking about themselves. It's when you stop thinking about yourself, when you think about the other, right? And right now, so let's go back to Woodrow Wilson, right? And then there was Hoover, and then FDR, and then Harry Truman and Ike, Kennedy, LBJ, Nixon, Jerry Ford, Jimmy Carter. Everyone thinks, well, Jimmy Carter was the one good guy, he tried. Well, no, because the mess that is the Middle East is thanks to Jimmy Carter. Yes, he got Egypt and Israel to have a peace treaty, but all the rest was pretty much up to him, right? And he, at a certain point, could have dealt with Iraq, but the powers that shouldn't be wanted the Ayatollah in, and so they had the Shah double down of being nasty, and they they made for this Ayatollah Khomeini's hotel bill in Paris for 20 years. And when the Shah left because he went to America to get his cancer taken care of, and basically they took care of him, the U.S. Air Force flew the Ayatollah Khomeini back to Iran in a C-130, and the two guys who helped him off were General Secord, Ali North. I mean, guys, and then we got the Islamic revolt, but it wasn't the Islamic revolt, it was the CIA revolt. And today, look at all the countries that are upset, that you got people out on the street. You got Hong Kong, you got Iraq, you got countries, Chile, the most successful economic, the one country in South America that kind of everyone gets a slice of the pie. They're upset because the average guy's slice is like this big. The oligarchs are this big. So they're saying, hey, and so, they're talking about economic inequality, and they're talking about, Medicare for all. And, in the United States, right, we are number 28 in the medical quality for the average citizen, right? But we pay the most. We spend trillions, little countries like Ireland and, other countries like England and France and Spain and Germany and Italy and Sweden all have, single payer of some sort. And I lived in Ireland when they weren't the rich country they are today, because they are the EU darling. But, everyone lived in mud huts and, didn't have any teeth. But they did have, they did have dentists. I lived in a little town. I went, oh, look, I had a really bad tooth, went in there. I needed a root canal. They did it that day. And then Yeah, I didn't have to wait online. I didn't, and it was a little town. It wasn't a big city, and when it came time, they're all done. Everything feels good. They gave me the medicines, and I didn't even have to go to a pharmacy. They gave me the medicines that I needed. And I said, so what do I owe you? And they say, nothing. I said, what do you mean? So, well, we have single payer health care here, right? And nobody, you know. So they said, no, we don't even have the paperwork for you to pay, right? You want to give some money, go to the church and put some in the poor box. And I didn't do that because I knew that priest used to take that money and buy booze. So, and that's why I constantly talk about love's co-creation, right? And being there for all our brothers and sisters, all our relations. And, I don't know why. I mean, that's what I kind of do to my best. I'm a human being. I can have good days, bad days, right? I'm kind of sick, so I have my good days, Like I haven't been drinking that much coffee, right? So yesterday, though, I did, right? And so, I made a mess, and that's because, I have my dad's blood. And the last, I don't know, 15, 20 years of his life, he'd make him, he would just, he, where he lived where he lived in North Carolina and Florida, um, the neighborhood Walmarts and stores like that wouldn't let him in because he would just, the mud river would come down his pant leg and he would just leave a trail where he didn't care, right? And he used to take his pants off in the dressing room and leave a gigantic brown puddle of mud, and he would wipe his butt off on those pants, and he'd get another, pair of shorts or something, and buy those and walk out with that. And he'd leave the messy pants there in the floor of the waiting room. And I said, Dad, that's what they have Depends for. Oh, I don't need those. I said, yeah, Anyway, he wasn't thinking about the happiness of the poor person who had to clean up his mess. And that's why those stores, they put his picture up on the door and put a line through it. And all the guys and gals in the yellow things who were greeters, you can't come in, So I used to have to go do this shopping for him. Anyway, so, and his car smelled like, so, all he had to do was wear Depends. But he didn't want to. I don't need those. He didn't like how it looked. Well, it looked a lot worse. And his house was always covered with, he would bend over right on the wall. And, when they were really going downhill the last year, I had to get people to take care of them. And my dad called me up, and I was, working for the Desperate Lawyers, doing pretty good. And I was having a contract, I was, negotiating a thing. And my dad, you have to come here and take care of it now. I said, well, Dad, I'm working. What kind of work do you have? Work's not important. I said, Dad, you want to pay me $20,000? I'll come. Otherwise, I got to finish this project. And I'm bringing my dog. Don't bring your dogs. I said, so, like when Bella had her puppies, I had 6 of these puppies. And again, my dog, you had to come. And it was, cold up on the hill. So I went, after I took care of business, I went and I had like 6 puppies with me. Now, my mom was a dog girl. And my dad had serious PTSD, because he worked for General LeMay, and he incinerated Germany, and then he went on with LeMay with B-29s and incinerated Japan. And then he came back, and LeMay started SAC, and my dad prepared for Armageddon. So my dad had some serious PTSD because he had the death of millions of people on his soul, right? And so no matter how gregarious and nice he was to the general public, he had that issue. So his, fear, hate, and self-loathing was pretty high on the thing. So he was a total transactional guy, right? So, but he had his moments of being really great and fun and spontaneous and a cool guy. That was. Hey there, research. So I I basically um you know said no, Dad. So anyway, my mom had basically got really really sick, ended up in the hospital, died, and then they have this thing bounce back. She came back and she was good and she was better than she was before she got sick. So they sent her back home and said, okay, by law in Florida, okay, she was this sick, so that means she needs, you know, care. Right now, my parents had some money, so they couldn't just, get the hospice for free. So they had to go to a company, and so the state of Florida mandated that my mom needed 24/7 care, and my dad was paying $16 an hour for some schlemiel to sit in the living room chewing gum and reading magazines. It did not interact. Would make sure she took her pills and you know stuff like that, but really just sat there making $16 an hour. My dad couldn't stand it, and then it was in '08, and the crash happened, and he lost a third of his assets, and he lost a big chunk in the stock market, and he went from being a really rich guy to just a well-off upper middle class guy, and that really burnt his toast. So anyway, he wanted me there, and he called me. I said, Dad, I got to finish this job. And oh no, you gotta come now. Gotta come now. I said, Dad, I don't gotta do anything. I've been taking care of you for 28 years, and you know the rules. I'm only there if you sound too nice. You sound pretty stressed out. Anyway, so I get there, and as soon as I pull in, I go through the front door, and there's this lady sitting in a nurse, white uniform, white shoes, not a nurse, reading a magazine, chewing gum, and he said, "No, you're here. You can take care of us." Right. So, I went and got the dogs. Brought them in. And my mom, oh, look at the puppies. So, she, anyway, about 2 hours later, hey, that kid's not screaming loud enough. He's got to scream louder. And not only scream, but scream Christmas songs from the radio. Your connection is unstable. Please wait while we try to reconnect. I've only been on for 18 minutes. There's only one of you there. You haven't even given me a thumbs up. How can YouTube besmirch me so bad? Oh, anyway, so this other moron shows up in a white uniform and white shoes, and my dad won't let him in. So, goes back. Well, 2 hours later, the sheriff is there with Nurse Ratchet from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And they walk in and come straight to me, and the police says, I'm arresting you for parent abuse. He goes, yes. I've only been there for, 5 hours, and I'm being arrested for palliative. My father goes, what are you talking about? He didn't do anything. He's taking care of us. And, Nurse Ratchet said, well, when he showed up, you fired the 2 girls, and you can't do that. The court says that your wife has to be taken care of by. And so my father goes right in her face and starts like about to choke her to death. And the cop kind of steps back and looks at what's going on. And he goes to me, come here. We go outside. He lights up a cigarette. He goes, so that's your father? I go, yep. I said, he goes, I see it. Your father fired those 2 girls. You just showed up here to take care of them. And he said, okay. So you're not getting arrested. Not a problem. And I see what he's, So I'll tell you what. Here's my card. You go find some people who will take care of your mother, not those pinheads. Because, he sees those girls in the white uniforms and the white shoes, all the time. And he knows the story. So he goes, and, my name's Bob. Good to see you. I'll come by and visit every now and then. I said, hey, great. Because he's not just a police. He's like a police for this. So he's kind of a social worker. He has some training. Anyway, so the big crash is happening. Every everyone. That's the story. So there I am. You know, kind of. You know, my dad puts an ad in the paper. Looking for someone to take care of. Two old folks, and he interviews maybe 60 people, right? And they're all people with, they have all these credentials and education and da da da. And they're expecting to get, 18 to $30 an hour. And my father's, well, economic change. And these people, they've gotten fired from their last, economic times. They get fired, they let go. So they come in expecting this. And my dad says, after like talking to him for about an hour, and he gives them, he does the cooking. My mom doesn't cook anymore. So my dad's a terrible cook. And so he makes these oatmeal raisin cookies, which he makes oatmeal in the morning. And then he kind of just throws some raisins in and then puts them on a pan and sticks them in the oven, forgets about them, and carbonates them. Turns them to concrete black chunk of coal, and he gives them those as cookies and water. The people are like looking at him like, huh? And anyway, after about an hour and a half of him like, so where'd you go? What'd you do? What blood type are you? What da 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 da. He goes, well, if you want to work for $3 an hour, and at that time the minimum wage was like $7 in Florida, and they like you. So he does that for a few days, and I'm sitting in on the thing, and so there'll be one person who seems, empathetic, good, not in a uniform, not with a big resume, but, has been doing it for a number of years because they like taking care of people. Anyway, and then when my dad says $3, they go, well, how about 7? How about just minimum wage? Oh, no, $7. So I would make my own list. And I basically, out of all of those people, got about 10. And out of those 10, got about 5 who were like good, right? And so I went and called them, when they would go out, and I would say, listen, I think you're the one. Give me your phone number again. Here's my cell phone, and I'm going to, I'm kind of, taking care of things. So, but my dad, you see what my dad is. So that's what you'd have to deal with, right? And they saw all of these shite stains, all over the walls, all over the furniture, all over the floor, because my dad would never clean it up. And the cleaning lady would just kind of clean it up, but not really, so the house smelled. And and that was my dad, right? And my mom, she didn't let my dad in her room. And so she was fine to be where she was. She had her lazy boy rocker. She had her window that looked out on the water, and she watched the sparkly water and would fall asleep. Anyway, so and then she'd get up at night and mosey around, and she made pretty good. She was a good baker. She would make cookies, but she wouldn't let my dad have any. Anyway, so I got 5 people, right? 3 ladies, 2, one to come, from 9 in the morning till about 4. One to come about, or 2, one to come at 2 till about 6, and then the lady from 6 until the morning. And she would cook dinner, and my mom would wake up. So that lady was a night owl too. So they would play cards and stuff like that. So once I got, those people hired, and I paid them at least $10 an hour. But then I found this woman who was inattentive and loved cleaning shit. And she said, when we walked out to her car, and I said, I think she says, your house really needs to be cleaned from stem to stern. It's like, it's like, it really needs. I said, you're right. She goes, I love cleaning, right? And so, you know, I said, you're hired. So she would clean the girls, the other three, and then I had one other one who did the weekends. Who was like the pinch hitter. When something happened, she would be on call, but she would work mostly on the weekends because two of those girls didn't want. So the nighttime woman worked 7 days a week, except a few days when she wanted off, and then the pinch hitter would come in, right? And that the last 7 months of my parents' life, those people took care of them, and they were really sweet, and they really cared for my mom. My dad, and they kind of kid, my dad's a kidder, so they would kid, but they knew what a jerk he was, and and that it was all about him. It was all transactional. He was only nice to them when he wanted them to be nice to him, and that was my dad because of his PTSD, his DID, right? He didn't know who he was, right? The real guy he was, born as a little Italian boy in New York. He wanted to be white. He wanted to be rich. He wanted to be respected. So anyway, he was, but nobody, everyone kind of, he was very endearing, you know, he could talk to people and be interesting, but other than that, not really much, right? So, and that's, where's my grandmother? His mother was the total. If I don't know who it is, I don't pick up. I let them leave a message. Only call them back. Anyway, so that's the secret to life. You know, the secret to being happy is making others happy, and that's why my father was miserable for most of his life. Now he adored my mom, but all he could do was buy her stuff because his his persona, he could go off the trigger at any moment. And that's when my grandma took me away as an infant, so I wouldn't be, you know, besmirched, because that's when whatever your personality, however, whatever you are, kind of comes from, you know, I remember when Bella had her puppies, they popped out being what they were, meaning brave and smart and this or that and noble, and they all came from Bella. So, and they look just like her. They were all movie stars. They were all totally black and pretty much either had a white star on their head or their heart or on their ear. Their coloring was like really, oh, look at that. They're so cute. And they looked great, right? And they had a built-in blow dryer. I mean, they were just movie stars. Whereas Homer, he popped out like a calico cat. He was like a patchwork quilt of 20 different dogs. He had ears of one dog and nose of another and lots of different hair. His tail puffed out like a feather duster, right? And the rest of, different parts he had like on his shoulders. I mean, because when I saw Bella I always thought Bella was a lesbian. And one day I came out, I was staying at a friend of mine's house, came out, and about 5 dogs were around, having their way with her. And all of the dogs looked like Bella, except for some of the nicest points of the other dogs. Bella, where Homer was everything else, right? And when Homer came out, he was the runt of the litter, and Bella was just like pushed him. I made a nice little nest for her to deliver her babies. It was up on a couch, and she kind of, Yeah, stuck here and there, and and but when Homer popped out, she looked at him and knocked him on the floor. I mean, it was on the other side of the room, and I hear this thud, and it's this little puppy dog that looked like a feather duster, and I picked him up and I dusted him off, and I said, "Oh, who's the cute little?" And I didn't do that with any of the other dogs, and I put him on the tip, and um, and a few minutes later, I went back to writing at the other side of the room in my window, and I hear the thud, and there's homie, on the floor again. And I go, Bella, what is wrong? And she looks at me, I don't want this one. So I had a coat that had big pockets, and I stuck them in the pocket. And I had purchased formula that you give to babies, and I made some up just in case of something like this. I had bottles with a nipple, and I stuck homie on the nipple in my pocket, and he just loved it, right? And so, and that was like the first 2 hours of his life. He ended up in my pocket, like warm, and the coat was closed, and he could feel my heartbeat, and I was his mommy, his daddy, his everything, right? Where the other dogs, I was the alpha dog, right? I was nice to them, played with them. But the first thing I did, so when after she got out of the bed, I had a blow up, 2-year-old swimming pool, a little circle, right? And I blew it up, and Bella could get up and walk over and get out and get away from the puppies. But the puppies couldn't get out. So I put those little puppy mats on the bottom, and they learned to just go on the mats, right? The whole gang, right? And once they got to be about this big, they came out about this big. Once they got to be about this big, I got these harnesses, not kind of, necklace, choke collar. No, I got this thing that went around their shoulders and around their tummy, like a harness, like you would pull a sled. And these little teeny ones, and they were on sale at the pet shop, and they were getting rid of them, so they were $1 a piece. So I bought 10 of them, and it was really great because I put them on, and they wore them all the time. And when I want to, get them, I would pick them up like a pocketbook, right? And I had this rope that I put a bunch of hooks on, like snaps. And I would take them outside. I would feed them. Bella would feed them. I would pick them all up. Like I had a handful of handbags. I'd snap them all together and put them, on this thing of grass. And I put down a little, one of little puppy mats out there, and they would go out there. And then after a week, I took the mat away, and because they're all hooked together, they'd go in different directions, but they'd stay right there, right? They wouldn't, right? So so within 2 weeks, the dogs were housebroken and pooped and pissed outside, right? And they were still in their little swimming pool, so they couldn't get out. And then after about 4 weeks, that's when I finished my job, and I went to Florida with that. And I said, Dad, I'm going to show up with Bella and 6. Oh, get rid of those puppies. You can't show up here with puppies. No puppies. No puppies. I said, Dad, what do you want me to do? Throw them out the window on I-95? Anyway, I showed up with the puppies, and they were really cute. And they stayed. There was this little kind of garden, walled-in garden, and they stayed there. Put the swimming pool there. They didn't poop there. The first day they were there, I took them out to the corner of the house where nobody went, put down one of those puppy mats, put them on that. They pooped on the puppy mat. Next day, I put them back there, and they pooped over there. For the rest of the time that they were there, the next 6 to 8 weeks, they would poop over there, right? So they didn't mess. My mom loved them, and my dad really had nothing to complain about, but he complained about everything. So when they were it was about New Year's, and they were about almost 10 weeks old. So they were pretty big. They were about that big. And they were so cute and they were so smart and they all had their own personal personality. And I had taught them, they were housebroken, they pooped in the same place so I could scoop it all up. And no one stepped in anything. And I got them because Bella loved to play with the ball. They all loved to play with the ball. And I taught them, stop, sit, lie down. So at 6 weeks, they stopped, sit, lie down, right? And not the same word to them. Stop, sit, lie down. And they would all walk on either side of me. So it would be Bella and three of them, and the other three on the other side. And we would walk down the street. I had no leashes on them. We'd stop, sit. And if we stopped for more than 30 seconds, they would sit, And if we were still in one place for more than a minute or two, they'd lie down without me going. And people were amazed. My parents lived in this gated community. Everybody else had a dog, and they had to be, leashed, and the dogs were, and these guys, right? And the security guys liked me, and so they never complained. But real anal retentive people would complain to security that this guy's got these dogs and they're not on a leash, right? So, I would, put three of them together to Bella. And the leash she would hold in her mouth, right? And so she would walk the puppies. She would walk next to me. So there, everybody was on a leash. And the people would get really upset and say, well, the guy isn't holding the leash. The dog's got it in its mouth. And the security guys, well, are the dogs on a leash? Well, yes, they're all on a leash, but the guy's not holding the leash, And these people were not happy. They were zillionaires, but they were not happy. None of them were happy. And my dad first got this place. He got a pretty good deal on it. He bought it in 86 when the savings and loan. So this place was almost bankrupt. And he bought one of the houses. He fixed it up the way he wanted it. And he got a contract where, they have to pay this kind of, to keep up the golf course and the tennis courts and the club. So he paid $200 a month for 3 years. And every year it would go up a little bit. But by the time he'd been there for 20 years, 20-something years, maybe almost 30 years. And and by the time that time came around, so he had like this standard kind of concrete Florida house. It was very nice, tiled floor. It went out to the patio in the back and the front, and those areas were kind of gated in, and it's very nice. And he was right on the lake. Not every house was on the lake, so it was, and he had planted a lot of trees and bushes around, so it's very pretty. But most of those houses that were like his had been purchased by somebody, and they would buy two of them, and they'd bulldoze them down and build a gigantic, big Florida house because it had a nice clubhouse, a really nice clubhouse. Anyway, so in the monthly charge, they charged you $300 for food, whether you ate it or not, right? And so my dad never did. He would go to they had two fancy dinners a month, and he would go dressed up in his fanciest clothes, and he would have my mom dress up like the queen. And because my mom was a trophy wife till the day she died. But, she, as she got older, her strange sense of humor came out. And so my dad was, Mr. Virgo. So he's a club. Only so many people are going to show up. But he'd make a reservation. And so I'll be there at 6. He wanted to be there at 6. So he would get us, get all ready. We're going to be there at 6. We'd leave at 5:45. You could walk there quicker than my dad would drive. So, and he, the car would smell like, ugh. So, I remember one time, and my mom pretended she was demented, but she wasn't. She just didn't want to talk to my father or have anything to do with him. So she would just pretend she didn't know who are you? Where she and I would be talking about poetry and writing, and she'd be telling me stories of the old days before she met my dad. Anyway, so this one time, my dad's out there, you know, his last few years, he read every freaking book in that Florida library, and they were mostly, women's love stories. So he read all these, right? And he read everything else, and then he started reading all about. So he's reading one of these. He kind of got a little distracted, and he looks, oh my God, it's almost 6 o'clock. We have to go. We have to go. And he's been ready since 4:30. He's been in his suit since 4:30. And their furniture was the crappiest Sears, crappy Florida furniture, not comfortable at all. The only two chairs that were comfortable was my dad's and my mom's. Everybody else who had sat there would be like, you'd slide down. Anyway, so I would bring one of the chairs from the dining room because they were nice straight back and they were kind of well cushioned. And I would say, why didn't you sit on the couch? No, Dad. Anyway, so he sends me in to go check out Mom, right? And my mother, now she had this long hair that she was like Rapunzel, and she would wrap it up and have it in this kind of unbelievable crown of white hair, right? And she still had a very shapely body, so she had this was her color. Virtually all her clothes were this blue, and she had a kind of sweater like this, but sleeveless, not like this. She had a lot of these kind of sweaters, and this was sleeveless. And so I go in, and my mom is totally naked, and she has brushed out her hair so she looks like Albert Einstein. And she has a big patch between her legs, and she just brushed that out so she looks like a porcupine down there. And she's totally naked, and she's got her sweater that has no sleeves, and she's got pretty big breasts, and she has instead of her arms through it, she's got her breasts going sideways, right? And she's kind of playing with her nipples. And I go in and I look at her and she looks at me and I start laughing hysterical. And she starts laughing hysterically because she looks at the mirror and she's like looking at herself going like this on her nipples and her hair sticking way out here. And my father comes in and what are you guys laughing about? Because he wanted to be in on the joke because he liked jokes. And there's my mom twiddling her nipples and her hair and her porcupine all brushed out, and my father screams like and craps his pants in the worst crap mud flood I'd seen as of yet. And luckily he was out in the hallway because my mom gets up totally naked, goes over the door and slams the door in his face, and he's standing in the lake of his mud flood. And see you later, researcher. And so they didn't even give me a thumbs up, buddy. Why aren't you streaming on Dreamy Dreamland? Well, I'll have to figure that one out. Well, I'm going to have to go. Okay? Okay. Catch you later. I would have known unless you told me. Thanks.